I just couldn't stay home. I was so nervous.
Nervous? Why should you be nervous, Judy?
Well, after all, Mr. Leroy, I was thinking maybe I'm not good enough for the part.
Well, Judy, even a smart little girl like you can be wrong.
It's been a long time since 1939, but The Wizard of Oz remains a timeless classic, remembered for its greatness as a film. Also, some of us have seen the disasters that happened to the actors of the movie on set, but the real, darker story is actually in the audition process and how they landed their roles. In 1938, a lot of things changed for the actors who got to audition for The Wizard of Oz, and while some had a very mind-twisting experience, which is absolutely more than you can imagine as we unravel it all in this video, some other cast members, like Billy Burke, almost had a stress-free journey into landing their roles. At the time Billy was cast to portray Glinda, she was already a famous and established actor with a long career in the theater. Unlike other actors, including Toto, who had to audition, Billy was hired based on her impressive acting resume. It was a common practice for studios to hire talented, popular actors without auditions, based on their past productions and screen presence. And this is going to be a lot to unpack as we get to actors like Judy, who weren't famous and had to go through a lot before they could land their roles in The Wizard of Oz. But before you learn of Judy's hellish audition process, it gets so interesting when you realize how the actor who played the Scarecrow, Ray Bolger, landed his role. Ray was a contract player for MGM by the time The Wizard of Oz audition process was underway, and with that, Ray landed a sweet deal as he was given the role of the Tin Man without having to audition. But for a fascinating reason, which you'll find hilarious, Ray totally declined playing the character of Tin Man as he was unhappy with the choice and strongly desired to play the Scarecrow. Also, Ray was working with a powerful agent at the time, and together they were able to convince the studio chief to let Ray switch roles with Buddy Ebsen, who was already in motion to be cast as the Scarecrow at the time. Luckily for Ray, he got his chance to snatch the role from Buddy, which he thought was more suitable for him. However, Ray was insistent on playing the Scarecrow, not the Tin Man, which he was initially offered because he believed the Scarecrow role would catapult him to stardom and provide an excellent opportunity to showcase his signature dance. And honestly, Ray was determined to secure the role for himself alone.
I loved the thought of being the Scarecrow, and I could not imagine anybody else playing the part. And I could do all the kinds of steps that I wanted to do, and it was something else.
Following his strong desires, Ray took bold steps to demand and fight for the role alongside his wife.
And I got my wife and I went up to Mr. Mayor's office, and we fought and fought and fought, and I finally won out.
While Ray's brutal plans and fight worked in his favor and secured him the role of the Scarecrow, it was an unfortunate switch for Buddy Ebsen, who ended up portraying the Tin Man after the Scarecrow was snatched away from him. Just as you'll soon discover about the rest of the cast during some of the audition process's more uncomfortable moments, Buddy didn't have a smooth audition for The Wizard of Oz either. Buddy had initially set his mind to play the Scarecrow until Ray Bolger happened and he was offered the role of the Tin Man, and Buddy gladly accepted the role and went on to record songs and rehearse in preparation for the role. But unfortunately, he fell terribly sick from the toxic aluminum powder in his costume, which led to him having breathing difficulties and cramping, which got him hospitalized until he eventually left the production. And as soon as he was written out of the film, the role of the Tin Man was recast immediately, with Jack Haley taking over the role. Interestingly, Jack didn't have to audition since he was brought on board solely to replace Buddy. Additionally, the Tin Man's makeup was changed to aluminum paste, a safer alternative to prevent the tragedy that befell Buddy from recurring. While you might be sad for Buddy, whose whole short moment on set of The Wizard of Oz was nothing but a disaster from getting his original role as the Scarecrow taken away from him to not being able to complete the other role as the Tin Man, the story absolutely gets worse when you finally get to see the other cast members' painful audition process for the film. Judy Garland's experience on The Wizard of Oz has been flawed since the audition process. What many people don't know is that Judy's role in Everybody Sing actually made her a top pick to portray Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. In Everybody Sing, she played a role as a singer who disguises herself with blackface in a desperate bid to land a role in a musical and support her financially struggling family.
Where are you from?
Yeah, I hitchhiked from Memphis, sir.
Huh?
See, I plumb wore out my thumb.
You did, eh? What's your name?
Opal Pearl Washington.
and I'm one of twins.
This role, where she was playing a black character with her face painted, was a crazy one, which Judy later revealed she was forced to do as a child, but it was also the performance that made the Wizard of Oz production really get to see her singing and acting talent.
Yeah, Emma Ruby passed on, but my mammy didn't mind so much because we got 12 others. All twins.
Is that so?
While this would have been heavily criticized today, it was somehow applauded at the time, but that's not even the craziest part of Judy's audition story, because trust us, it gets even more awkward and darker. The role of Dorothy is the most important in The Wizard of Oz, which is why the studio needed to cast the perfect actor. For a long time, there has been a misconception about how Judy became Dorothy, and we are here to set the record straight. There's a popular story of how Shirley Temple, who was already famous at the time, was the top choice wanted by studio executives for the role of Dorothy. The story then goes on to say that Shirley was under contract with another studio, making her unavailable for the role. It was also mentioned that her voice did not meet the required vocal demands, which is why Judy became the next available choice. However, that might not be the entire true story behind the audition process. The real story is that the rights to The Wizard of Oz were specifically purchased to launch Judy Garland's career. After seeing her performance in Everybody Sings, the studio recognized Judy's potential as a rising star. Also, she had already signed a contract with MGM, and the original plan was to make her a breakout star with The Wizard of Oz. However, here's where the twist in the story actually started. The president of the parent company of MGM, Lowe's Incorporated, was worried about giving Judy that chance because she wasn't a household name at that point, and it was him who wanted a popular name, Shirley Temple, who had been the biggest box office draw for 4 years before the casting for the role. Funnily enough, they stylishly auditioned Shirley for Dorothy by sending a producer, Roger Edens, to hear Shirley's voice in an unofficial audition, but she didn't have the range that Judy had. Also, she couldn't get out of her contract with Fox, and the next best and original choice was to circle back to Judy, who was initially meant to become Dorothy. And it gets even better because MGM recorded a PR conversation, which they'd rather have people believe was how Judy landed her role in the movie.
We've just seen the test we made of you for the part, and
You mean I'm...
you guessed it, you're Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
And this audio is believed to have been recorded later on, and not the original reaction of Judy to the news because she was being considered from the very start.
Oh, Mr. Leroy, it can't be true. I dreamed and hoped for a chance like this, but I never really thought I'd be so lucky. But, Mr. Leroy, I just can't believe it. But if I do wake up and it's all true, I promise I'll work and study and do anything to make good.
The fascinating thing about The Wizard of Oz is that things always take a sharp turn just when you think you've heard it all. Another thing you might find shocking in this video is that the dog Terry, who played Toto, also auditioned to be in the production. Terry was first discovered while she was in an audition with Shirley Temple in a movie called Bright Eyes in 1934. The dog's final test on Bright Eyes involved her meeting with Shirley Temple and her Pomeranian. Surprisingly, Terry got along well with the other dog, and Shirley was proud to say the dog had been hired. Then, she was trained and adopted by Hollywood dog trainer Carl Spitz for The Wizard of Oz, where Terry was trained on specific tasks like sitting in a basket and responding to commands before auditioning. Terry was officially renamed after her character in The Wizard of Oz, Toto, in 1942, and went on to make many more productions, with her most famous role being in The Wizard of Oz. Margaret Hamilton was famous for her role as the Wicked Witch of the West from the popular film, but she almost wasn't cast at all. The original actor intended for the role was Gail Sondergaard, who was meant to be a seductive sorceress because of her beautiful but evil nature, but they changed the concept and turned her makeup into a more traditional ugly witch, and this is where things went wrong for Gail, who was reluctant to wear the disturbing makeup, fearing it could ruin her career. Gail eventually turned down the role, saying, "In those days, I was not about to make myself ugly. I have no regrets. Absolutely no regrets." After Gail refused to play the ugly witch, the role went to Margaret Hamilton, who didn't have to go through a traditional audition, as her agent called her to see if she would be interested in the part. Also, the studio had a 6-picture deal with her, and they wanted her for the part after Gail turned down the offer. And interestingly enough, Margaret was more than happy to take on the role, as she had been a longtime fan of the book and was surprised to have been considered. Bert Lahr, who played the Cowardly Lion, was already a famous comedian who was a star of radio and stage, and he was just straight up offered the role, as it was more like MGM securing a big name for the film. However, Bert's offer came with salary negotiations as he was a big star, and it was agreed that he would be compensated $2,500 per week for featuring in the film. Although he didn't audition like some of the cast, he underwent a rigorous process to land the role, including multiple makeup and costume tests to perfect the Cowardly Lion's look and ensure the character design was spot on.